Life in Portland, Maine, always felt like a promise to me. The crisp salt air, the scent of pine, the endless stretch of the Atlantic. It was more than just a place to live, it was my calling. I was Jason, a marine biologist, 42, and my world revolved around the ocean, its delicate ecosystems, and the tireless work of the conservation trust I dedicated my life to. My days were a blur of research vessels, lab tests, and late nights poring over data, all in the pursuit of understanding and protecting the marine life off our coast. It was demanding, yes, but it filled me with a purpose so profound it often felt like breathing. I lived for those moments at sea, the horizon stretching infinitely, the quiet hum of the engine, the thrill of discovery. My passion was my anchor, my compass. Renee, my wife, was a different sort of anchor. She was beautiful, vibrant, a whirlwind of energy when we first met. She'd always been supportive, or at least, I thought she was. She managed our home, handled the social events, and always had a perfectly cooked meal waiting, even if I often ate it alone after returning from a late field trip. We had a comfortable life, a beautiful old house with a view of the bay, a life that many would envy. But lately, I'd started to feel a subtle shift, a quiet hum beneath the surface of our domestic harmony. She'd mentioned friends with bigger houses, more exotic vacations, flashier cars. It was never a direct complaint, just a gentle, persistent drip of comparison that I tried to ignore, attributing it to the stresses of everyday life. One evening, a few months before everything imploded, Renee came to me with an idea. We were in our home office, a space I'd carved out for myself amongst her perfectly curated decor. She suggested installing a small camera, a nanny cam, she called it, though we didn't have kids and rarely had housekeepers. It was for security, she explained, a little extra peace of mind, especially with me gone so much. I remember feeling a flicker of discomfort, a strange sensation of being watched in my own sanctuary, but I shrugged it off. It was a small, unobtrusive thing, barely noticeable amongst the books and scientific papers. I trusted her. She was my wife. And so, the quiet eye was installed, a silent witness to my long hours, my frustrations, my triumphs, and my most vulnerable moments, all within the four walls of my supposed private space. I never questioned its true purpose, lost as I was in the labyrinth of my research and the looming deadline of the most important grant application of my career. That grant, if secured, meant millions for my team, for our critical conservation efforts, for the very future of the ocean I loved. It was everything. The pressure of that grant application was immense, a heavy blanket draped over my every waking moment. Millions of dollars, years of research, the livelihoods of my team, it all hinged on me. I spent countless hours holed up in that home office, the scent of stale coffee and printer toner clinging to my clothes. The nanny cam was there, a tiny black dot on the bookshelf, an unblinking eye I'd long since forgotten about. My phone calls became increasingly fraught, my video conferences tense. I found myself pacing, running a hand through my thinning hair, my voice often rising in frustration as I battled bureaucratic hurdles, dealt with the egos of potential donors, and navigated the treacherous waters of scientific funding. I recall a particular call, late one night, with an old friend from the university. I was venting, truly letting my guard down. I might have called one particularly demanding donor a bloated walrus, or scoffed at the performative philanthropy of some corporate benefactors. I remember saying something about how we scientists often had to package truth in pretty bows to appeal to people who cared more about tax write-offs than the actual health of the planet. It was cynical, yes, born of exhaustion and exasperation, but it was honest. It was a moment of vulnerability, a rare glimpse into the compromises I felt forced to make for the greater good. I also confided my deep anxieties, the fear of failure, the crushing weight of responsibility. I spoke of sleepless nights, of the fear that all my life's work could be undone by a single missed comma in a budget proposal. Renee would occasionally poke her head in, offering a strained smile, a cup of tea, a quiet question about how much longer I'd be. I'd just nod, preoccupied, oblivious to the fact that every sigh, every frustrated word, every cynical remark was being meticulously recorded. She seemed to grow more distant during this period. Her support felt less genuine, more like an act. Her comments about our life became sharper, laced with a subtle disdain. She'd mention how my work consumed me, how I was married to the ocean, not to her. I brushed it off, told myself it was the stress of the grant getting to both of us. I promised her a vacation, a real one, far away from the salt and the labs, once this was all over. I genuinely believed that once the grant was secured, once the pressure eased, we could reconnect, find our way back to the easy companionship we once shared. She'd smile thinly, her eyes often drifting, as if she was already somewhere else, planning a different life. There were whispers of a new friend she was spending time with, a wealthier acquaintance from her social circle, but I dismissed them as idle gossip, the insecurities of a man too focused on work. I was so utterly absorbed in the fight for my research, for the future of the oceans, that I failed to see the much larger, far more personal storm brewing right in my own home. The grant application was finally submitted, a massive tome of data, proposals, and heartfelt pleas. I felt a profound, bone-deep exhaustion, but also a surge of quiet triumph. The finish line was in sight. Renee even poured us a celebratory glass of champagne that evening, her smile bright, almost too bright. For a brief moment, a fleeting breath, I thought we had weathered the storm. That peace lasted less than a week. Then came the emails, the frantic calls, the sickening dread that coiled in my gut. It started with an obscure environmental blog, then exploded onto several conservative news outlets known for their clickbait headlines and sensationalism. Elite scientist slanders donors, manipulates data, one screamed. Another, conservation hypocrite exposed, Dr. Jason Miller's secret disdain. My name, my face, my reputation, splattered across the digital landscape, twisted and distorted into something grotesque. It was a compilation, skillfully edited, of those moments of vulnerability, those late-night rants in my home office. My cynical remarks about bloated walruses and performative philanthropy were spliced together to make it sound like I despised every donor, every supporter. My anxieties about securing funding were reframed as a confession of manipulating scientific data for personal gain. My frustrations with bureaucracy were spun as an elitist dismissal of ordinary people. The public outrage was immediate and vicious. My email inbox flooded with hate mail, my social media was bombarded with accusations. People I'd worked with for years, colleagues I considered friends, started to distance themselves. The Conservation Trust, the very organization I'd given my life to, was forced to issue a statement disavowing my remarks, launching an internal investigation, and ultimately, suspending me without pay. The grant, the millions for my research, the future of our work, it was pulled. Just like that, years of dedication, decades of building a reputation, all gone. My career was effectively blacklisted. The tightly knit marine biology community, a world that had once felt like family, became a cold, unforgiving jury. My life's work, everything I believed in, lay in ruins around me. I remember staring at the headlines, the grainy video clips of myself, feeling a disconnect so profound it was almost surreal. It was me, but it wasn't me. It was a monstrous caricature crafted from my lowest moments. The betrayal cut deeper than just the loss of my career. It was a violation of my trust, my privacy. I paced our home, a ghost in my own house, trying to make sense of the sudden, brutal downfall. Renee was quiet. She offered hollow words of comfort, a gentle pat on the shoulder, but her eyes, when she thought I wasn't looking, held a strange, almost detached curiosity, like an audience watching a play unfold. She kept saying it would all blow over, that people would forget, but I knew better. This kind of smear, this public shaming, was indelible. I was shattered, adrift in a sea of despair, completely alone, or so I thought. The months that followed were a blur of accusation and defense, a grinding, soul-crushing battle I was losing. I fought the allegations, hired lawyers, tried to explain the context of those isolated clips, but the narrative was already set. The media had moved on, leaving me in the wreckage. My reputation was in tatters, my bank account dwindling, and my spirit, once so vibrant, felt like a dying ember. I barely ate, barely slept, lost weight, and the man who stared back from the mirror was gaunt, haunted. Renee, meanwhile, became increasingly detached, physically present but emotionally miles away. She'd spend long hours out, always with an excuse, always with an edge in her voice if I pressed. The chasm between us grew wider, deeper. Then, a glimmer, a lifeline from an unexpected source. Dr. Eleanor Vance, an old mentor, a sharp-eyed woman who had always believed in me, called. She'd been reviewing the compiled recordings, dissecting them with the precision of a seasoned scientist. Jason, she said, her voice gentle but firm. There are inconsistencies, subtle audio edits, peculiar fades. It's too clean, too perfect. This wasn't some random hack. This was targeted, professional, almost personal. Her words ignited a spark in the darkness. It was a long shot, but I clung to it. My lawyers, exasperated by my inability to pay, reluctantly followed this thread. We hired a forensic audio expert, a quiet woman who spent weeks sifting through the digital debris. She found the telltale signs of amateur editing, meticulously pieced together to create a seamless, damning narrative. The leak had originated from a specific network, an IP address. And that IP address, with a sickening thud, led directly back to our home network. The blood drained from my face. Our network. Our home. It couldn't be. My mind raced, frantically searching for an explanation, for an intruder, for anyone but Renee. The nanny cam suddenly loomed large in my memory, that innocuous device. I felt a cold, horrifying clarity descend. I confronted her that evening. She was scrolling through her phone, impeccably dressed for a dinner out. I showed her the report, the IP address, the irrefutable evidence. She didn't flinch. Not a flicker of surprise, no feigned indignation. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across her face. Finally caught on, did you? She said, her voice utterly devoid of emotion. She confessed, casually, as if discussing the weather. She was bored, she explained. Bored with my endless hours, bored with the smell of brine on my clothes, bored with our comfortable but unremarkable life. She wanted more. She'd been planning to leave me for months, for a wealthier man she'd met through her social circle. She'd orchestrated the leak, edited the clips herself, meticulously crafting my downfall, because, she said, I wanted to make sure you had nothing left to hold on to. I wanted a clean break, a fresh start. And you, my dear Jason, were simply in the way. The cruelty was breathtaking, a calculated malice that eclipsed even the public humiliation. My world, already shattered, splintered into a million tiny, unfixable pieces. The divorce was swift, brutal, and devoid of any semblance of civility. I moved out of the house, leaving behind the ghost of a life that never truly existed. Renee disappeared, presumably to her wealthier acquaintance, leaving me with the wreckage. The betrayal had hollowed me out, leaving an ache that throbbed deep in my bones. I could have pressed criminal charges. My lawyers advised it, seeing a clear case for defamation, sabotage, and privacy violation. But something in me recoiled from the idea. Another fight, another public spectacle, another entanglement with the woman who had already stolen so much. I realized, in that moment of profound despair, that pursuing her would only give her more power over me, more space in my head, more control over my narrative. I didn't want justice in the form of legal retribution. I wanted liberation. I wanted to reclaim my life, my name, my purpose, not through vengeance, but through unwavering dedication to what I believed in. I was left with nothing but my expertise, my passion, and a reputation that was still largely in ruins. It was a bleak landscape, but somewhere in the desolation, a tiny seed of an idea began to sprout. I started small, working from a cramped rented office, a single microscope, and a borrowed computer. I poured all my remaining energy into transparent, unimpeachable scientific work. I started blogging about my research, not just the findings, but the process, the struggles, the ethical considerations. I opened up, raw and honest, about what had happened, without naming Renee, but speaking to the profound personal cost of such an attack. I refused to be defined by her malice. I launched an independent marine research initiative, a bold, almost reckless move, relying entirely on crowdfunding and grassroots support. It was terrifying, humiliating at times, asking for donations, for belief, from strangers who only knew the smeared version of my story. But I felt a spark ignite, a sense of purpose that had been missing since the grant was pulled. This was different. This was mine. This was untainted. The road was long, paved with skepticism and the lingering shadows of my past. But slowly, painstakingly, something shifted. I shared updates constantly, posted raw footage from my solitary dives, explained complex scientific concepts in accessible language. People started to respond, not just with money, but with words of encouragement, with volunteered time, with an outpouring of genuine human connection. They saw the passion, the unwavering commitment, the real science. They saw me, not the caricature. My resilience became my story, a testament to the idea that truth, when given a platform, could still find its way through the noise. Small donations trickled in, then larger ones. Volunteers, mostly students and retired enthusiasts, offered their time and skills. I found myself back on the water, not in a fancy research vessel, but a small, borrowed boat, feeling the spray on my face, the familiar rhythm of the waves. It wasn't about grand pronouncements or lucrative grants anymore. It was about the work itself, pure and unadulterated. I discovered a deeper, more profound connection with the public, with individuals who believed in ethical science, in the power of a single person fighting for what's right. My initiative grew, slowly but steadily, attracting not just funding, but partnerships with smaller, more principled environmental organizations. The scars of the betrayal are still there, a quiet ache that reminds me of the darkness I walked through. They serve as a constant reminder of the fragility of trust, but also of the immense strength of the human spirit. I am not the man I was before. I am wiser, more grounded, more fiercely independent. My success now isn't measured in millions, but in the tangible impact of my research, in the restored habitats, in the thriving marine life. The truth, in the end, did prevail. My dedication, my unwavering commitment to my passion, won back public trust and attracted new, ethical funding. My life's work, once jeopardized by calculated malice, has not only been saved, but has been reborn, stronger, more authentic, and deeply rooted in the belief that integrity ultimately triumphs. It was a bittersweet journey, losing everything to find my true self, but in the solitude of the ocean, under the vast, forgiving sky, I finally found my peace.